This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Messer. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all to subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcasting device or, laptop or however you may be listening. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you get those alerts, you get those notifications, and you always know when we drop a new episode. Also, make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We would love to interact with you guys more on there. Again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure you follow us on there as well. And also make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate that on whatever podcasting app you're, listening to this on, Apple Podcasts, however it may be. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. We would also appreciate that as well. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these times. We have a fantastic show for you guys today. Today was really the first time I'm going to be able to talk about the NBA really restarting, all right? This was kind of like the reopening weekend, if you could call it. Bubble games are happening every day. We're getting like triple headers, quadruple headers on ESPN and TNT. Fantastic matchups, and these games actually matter. This is the finishing part of the regular season, and a lot of these other teams are trying to get into the playoffs. Teams like the Pelicans and the Blazers, and teams like the Grizzlies who are trying to stay in the playoffs. A lot of fun games already. I'm so happy the NBA is back for real. Shout out to Adam Silver, who really got this going, who formulated a bubble. I remember when it was first announced that the NBA was going to do this bubble in Orlando, and a lot of people, including myself, were skeptical at first. How are they going to make sure it's completely clean and completely, coronavirus free zone? But they have pulled it off, and I think they might be one of the few sports that are going to it's as close to perfect as you're going to get given this entire situation. Baseball is currently struggling with it. Who knows what football is going to look like. The NHL is doing a fantastic job as well with the bubble. So the bubble strategy was clearly the way to go. Shout out to the NBA for really pulling this off and giving us high-level basketball during these times. I don't know about you guys. I don't really see a big difference without the fans and the, simulated or quote-unquote fake crowd noise or fan noise. I love it. The NBA experience is incredible, and they've really rebounded. So this entire show, almost about 3 out of the 4 segments I'm going to do, is going to be dedicated to the NBA restarting. All of the games, I'm going to be going through pretty much each and every one. Some of the teams that I've been talking about before on this show, which teams are going to be, breakout, things like that. We're going to see how they did this weekend. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different teams, about how they all did during, again, this reopening period of the NBA, and I'm going to finish it off with talking about Trevor Lawrence. Who is going to win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes? That's going to be at the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around for that. I've said the Jacksonville Jaguars, but there are a couple of teams now who've really depleted roster. Who is going to, strike gold, or you could say, by losing this season into getting one of the greatest quarterback prospects of all time, in my opinion? We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence and what team he could potentially go to at the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around for that. But we're going to start off here with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I have said on this show, the Los Angeles Lakers, as currently constructed, are not a championship team, bearing everybody else, like on the Clippers, stays healthy. I believe they are a Western Conference team, and that's where I believe they will go. Now, I have said that there was an X factor on this team potentially that could propel them back into a championship, area, championship favorite, and I would feel more comfortable saying that, the Lakers could actually beat the Clippers 4 out of 7 times in a series, and that player was Kyle Kuzma. Now, the Lakers beat the Clippers a couple of days ago. And a lot of people have now dubbed the Lakers as, 100% they are better than the Clippers. They also played about, 20 minutes ago, and I'll talk about their most recent game against the Raptors as well. This weekend for me confirmed that the Lakers, as currently constructed, are still not a championship team. Did they beat the Lakers? Yes. Did they beat the Clippers? Yes. I understand that they did beat the Clippers 103 to 101. But folks, I don't think this game is an accurate representation of how the Clippers are going to play down there, when it gets to playoff time in a series. The Lakers really struggled to beat this Clippers team, when they were missing Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. Now, I understand that, Clipper fans or Laker fans aren't going to want to hear these excuses of why, the Clippers only lost because of this and because of this. But it's hard to ignore the fact that they are missing two 20-point per game scorers off the bench. Again, this is the best bench in the league by far, in my opinion. The Los Angeles Clippers' bench, that is. And the Lakers bench outscored them in that game. And that's not going to happen, I don't think, a single game in a real series between these Clippers and Lakers teams. Also, you had to bank on the fact of Anthony Davis getting 34 points, had a phenomenal night, in order just to keep pace with this Clippers team who was missing two 20-point per game scores. Again, Kawhi was phenomenal, 28 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. So was Paul George, 30 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. And I think something that people forget about the Clippers is that they actually haven't played as a full unit a lot. They're still learning to play with each other, while the Lakers have a really good chemistry system. Here's where I want to give the Lakers props, though. In my opinion, this team should not work at all, alright? This is a meme team. JaVale McGee, KCP, Danny Green, Kyle Kuzma, Alex Caruso, Dion Waiters, Dwight Howard, J.R. Smith, Markieff Morris, right? None of those guys really fit with each other. The only guys who maybe fit with each other are Kuzma. Caruso fits this team, I think, well as well. I don't know how much Kuzma fits this team from a basketball standpoint, playing with AD and LeBron. That's kind of forward overkill. The amount of centers they have on this team, again, AD, JaVale McGee, and Dwight Howard. Obviously, J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, players like that. This is a meme team. This should not work. But LeBron James and Anthony Davis have really, shined and made this team, I think, look better than it is. That is, the surrounding cast made them look better than it is. But you have to give them credit during this Clippers game. Guys stepped up. And what did I say to you guys before? Kyle Kuzma is the X factor of this team. What did I need from him? I said I needed between 16 and 20 points a game from him on efficient shooting. That's exactly what Kyle Kuzma did. He had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists in 32 minutes, very efficient from the floor, and shot very well from 3 as well. That is crucial for the Los Angeles Lakers. Another guy who I believe is another X factor, who I wasn't expecting to get as many minutes as he did, Dion freaking Waiters, man. He had a phenomenal game against the Clippers with 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Not a lot of points, but again, in only 21 minutes of action, he provided that spark off the bench. That's what the Lakers need. Also some perimeter shooting as well. So you have to give Frank Vogel credit in this situation as well, because while I said that, I really do believe that the Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are making the surrounding cast maybe look better than it is, right? At the end of the day, they're playing hard, and they are one of the best defenses in the league, man. When you look at guys like Alex Caruso, when you look at guys like Kyle Kuzma, both of them have played outstanding defense in their first 2 games. I'll get into their second game in a second. But come on, man, the defensive intensity of Alex Caruso, how many steals and dunks did he have in the Raptors game? Speaking of the Raptors game, the Lakers had another game, and this is why I'm kind of solidifying that they're not a championship team, right? The Raptors really kind of smacked them around, folks. I'm going to get to the Raptors later on in this show, but again, the Lakers, to me, right? They have X factors. There are guys, like I just mentioned, Kyle Kuzma, Dion Waiters. They can beat a team like the Clippers, right? They can barely skate by when Kuzma has a great game. And, Anthony Davis has 34, 8, and 4. LeBron will obviously have better than 16, 11, and 7 in the playoffs. I think that was a fluke game for him, in my opinion. And we'll talk about the Raptors game in a second. They have these X factors, but I don't see it consistently. I don't see this formula consistently working out for the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't think Dion Waiters can hold up like this. I don't think Kyle Kuzma can shoot a 3-point percentage consistently like this. And even when they do have good games, it's not necessarily leading to wins. Again, they barely beat the Clippers. Let's now switch gears to tonight against the Raptors. They lost by 15 tonight against the Raptors, right? That's ugly, in my opinion, right? The Raptors, I've talked about before, they're a great team, they're a great story. I think they're one piece away. They did not play like that tonight. The Lakers could not take advantage of Pascal Siakam only scoring 15 points tonight. They let Kyle Lowry absolutely torch them for 33. What did I tell you guys is a major weakness of the Los Angeles Lakers? Their poor defensive and perimeter defending guard play. Poor defensive guard play overall, right? I said a team like the Clippers, when they have Lou Williams, are going to exploit that in a 7-game series. And if Kyle Lowry is lighting up the Los Angeles Lakers guards for 33 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 assists, what do you guys think Lou Williams is going to do? What do you guys think James Harden and Russell Westbrook are going to do if they meet in a playoff series? That is a major, major weakness of this team. And don't get me wrong, the Raptors defense is phenomenal, and they're an extremely well-coached team, and Nick Nurse might be one of the best coaches in the NBA. The Lakers should be beating the Toronto Raptors. I don't think the Toronto Raptors are going to a finals. I think they're a second-round team, right? The Lakers are supposed to be a championship favorite, and they're losing by 15. Again, I understand it's quote-unquote just a regular season game, but all these games matter. You're trying to get back into shape. You're trying to prove what you do. The Lakers let OG Anunoby score 23 on them. Again, Kyle Lowry scored 33. You got to take advantage of games when Siakam and Fred VanVleet only combined for 28 points, right? LeBron, AD were terrible tonight. LeBron James kind of came on at the end at 20, 10, and 5. AD had 14, 6, and 3. Kyle Kuzma tonight, again, had 16 points. He played well, right? So you got to take advantage when Kyle Kuzma has these good games. That is one bright spot for the Los Angeles Lakers throughout these 2 games so far. Kyle Kuzma has looked really freaking good. He's looked really good, exactly what I told you guys he needed to do. Have a high shooting percentage, have a high 3-point percentage, play efficient, play fast, don't try to do this iso ball stuff that he was kind of doing in the scrimmage games, and he's been doing great. But it appears right now to me that even with Kyle Kuzma giving you those 16 points on efficient shooting every single night, the Lakers are still not capable of hanging with the Clippers in a 7-game series, or beating a team like the Raptors, maybe even beating a team like the Celtics, the Bucks, a lot of other teams in the East like the Heat even, maybe. That's my concern with the Los Angeles Lakers, and I understand that it was a really good moment for them to beat the Los Angeles Clippers on opening night. It was a big, big victory for the Lakers. But I took away, coming from that game in particular, forget the Raptors game, I took away coming away from the Clippers game of they just needed Lou Williams, and that game was a 15-point blowout. That's what I thought, in my opinion. If you have Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams, do you think that game is even necessarily that close? I see a 12, 15-point blowout, in my opinion, because of the poor defensive guard play. Now, the Lakers are great at paint defense, 100%, but when you kick it out to the guards, their 3-point defense, it's not the greatest. And again, the Raptors exploited that, and the Clippers will exploit that when they get Lou Williams back, stuff like that. I want to really quickly transition to the other Los Angeles team, the Clippers, for the next couple minutes or so, right? So I just went on the rant about the Lakers and how I still don't believe they're a championship team. The Clippers are the best team in the NBA. I don't care that they lost to the Lakers. How did the Clippers respond to barely losing to the Lakers, right? So we know how the Lakers responded to barely beating the Clippers, right? Coming off a really high win, they go out there and they get absolutely smacked by Kyle Lowry and the Toronto Raptors. What do the Los Angeles Clippers do in response to barely losing to the Los Angeles Lakers in a really close game? They absolutely smoke the living hell out of the New Orleans Pelicans. They win 126-103, right? Again, this game, I'm not taking so much from it from the Los Angeles Clippers. This is not a consistent thing. I'm pretty sure they were getting up there for the NBA record when it comes to 3 points made in a game. That's not going to be a consistent thing. This is the difference for me, though. This is the difference between the Lakers and the Clippers. We just saw the Lakers at their best, and it was against the Clippers when they were arguably at their worst. No Lou Williams, no Montrezl Harrell, only Kawhi and PG showed up, right? And they barely lose to the Lakers, who were at their best. AD had 34. Kuzma had 16. Dion Waiters had 11 off the bench. LeBron had, almost a triple-double, right? We saw the Lakers at their best. They barely beat the Clippers at their worst. This is what the Clippers do at their best. They score 126 points and blow the New Orleans Pelicans out of the water. Again, Kawhi Leonard had 24 points. Paul George had 28. Reggie Jackson with 15, right? Like, everybody almost had double, scoring. And Marcus Morris with 9. Zubac with 6. Beverly with 9, Shamet with 9, just guys hitting threes absolutely everywhere. That's the Clippers at their best. And when the Clippers are at their best, they are the best team in the league, and I'm not sure it's close. I'm really not sure the team like the Bucks or the Celtics can keep up. Again, they're my championship favorite, and that did not change for me just because they lost a game to the Lakers barely without their 2 best bench players. Again, one of the biggest, keys for the Los Angeles Clippers is that they are the deepest team in the league. They have the best bench in the league by far. And when you're missing Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, who are expected to be back by at least playoff time, if not sooner, there are excuses to lose a game by 1 point. The fact that the Clippers only lost by 1 point is incredible to me. And you got to look at it, man. How good are Kawhi Leonard and Paul George together? We had a very small sample size pre-hiatus of what they looked like together. I mean, they are consistently both dropping 25 plus and also being outstanding perimeter defenders or just lockdown defenders in general on the other end. It's so much fun to watch Kawhi Leonard and Paul George play. It was so much fun to watch these Clippers. Again, they're my championship favorites. The last thing I'll say on the Lakers quickly for this segment. You have to hand it to LeBron James. LeBron James, right? I know we all rant and rave about LeBron James. He's been hearing the noise that he doesn't play defense, right? You have to admit, what did LeBron James do? I know I just bashed the Lakers saying they're not a championship team, and in my opinion, they are not a championship team unless a guy like Kyle Kuzma maybe even takes another step, and Deion Waiters, and maybe injuries, things like that. I do not believe that the Los Angeles, Lakers are a championship team. But you have to hand it to LeBron James. He locked up both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on that play. That final game against the Clippers, we got a glimpse of 2013 Miami Heat LeBron James clamping up guys, one of the best defenders in the league. He's not going to be able to consistently do that, but if LeBron can give that team moments in clutch situations, that type of defense, maybe the Lakers do have a chance to get to an NBA Finals and win it. That's just my opinion. I really do believe the Clippers are the best team in the league, and when they're hot, man, from three, and they're at their best and they're at full strength, I'm not sure it's close, guys. All right, that is going to wrap it up for this segment. On the other side of the break, we're going to be touching on some of the other NBA teams. How did they do this weekend, right? I want to talk about three teams next segment who did not have the greatest start to the NBA, reopening weekend, and what should they be doing for the future? I'll be talking about the Pelicans, 76ers, and Utah Jazz right after this quick break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I just finished talking about both Los Angeles teams and how they did to start off the NBA, reopening weekend. Again, I think that the Los Angeles Clippers are the best team in the NBA, and I'm not sure it's close when everything's going right for them, despite their 1 or 2 point loss to the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, it was a great win by the Lakers, but I think they barely got by, and I think the Raptors today really exposed some holes in their team, specifically at the defensive guard play level. I want to switch gears now to three teams that did not have the greatest start in the world to their, opening weekend here in the NBA, right? Let's get right into it. So the New Orleans Pelicans, right? I'll start with them first. The New Orleans Pelicans, to me, were a team that I predicted to, get to the playoffs. I really believed, and I still on a surface level believe that they're going to make the playoffs, right? They were, I believe, the 10th seed. I think they were 2.5 or 3.5 games out of the Grizzlies going into, this, restart of the NBA. And I really thought that, the league wants Zion in, and I really did believe in Zion. I believed in the New Orleans Pelicans. I believed in Alvin Gentry. And really just this element of this is a young, energetic team that's going to compete, that's going to fight hard, and they're going to figure out a way to get into the playoffs, right? I'm starting, and I'm close to really switching gears on that. The Pelicans had a dreadful start to this, reopening of the NBA. Their first two games, right? So they have the first game ever, right? First game back, right? Even before the Lakers-Clippers games, they go against the Utah Jazz, and they only lose by a bucket. But there's some questions immediately. Zion Williamson was on a minutes restriction, apparently due to conditioning, which he was reportedly, as I'll directly quote it, pissed about. That he only played, I think, 15 minutes in the entire game. Again, he played great, but, the Pelicans had a lead and then choked it at the end, giving the Utah Jazz a slight victory. A Jazz team that played terrible the entire game, but managed to squeeze something out in the end. Now, in my opinion, I think Zion should have closed that game. I understand, right? I understand. You're dealing with, precious goods here, right, with Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson is a generational basketball talent. He's already pretty much an NBA freaking superstar. And yes, he is the best player on the New Orleans Pelicans already, and he will be for the next 10, 15 years, right? But again, at the end of the day, the Pelicans in particular have to treat every single game like a playoff game, right? For a lot of teams that are already clinched in the playoffs or are pretty sure they're going to make it, right? This is just a regular season game for them. I understand minutes restrictions. I understand guys resting, things like that. But for the New Orleans Pelicans, they're trying to get into the playoffs. Every game matters. It's a playoff push. How do you not have your best player, finishing the game and only having played 15 minutes? And it wasn't because of an injury. It was conditioning concerns, again, because he had to step out from the bubble because of, a family issue, right? That he just didn't get enough practice time to condition. I mean, the man had, I think he had 15 points in 13 minutes or 13 points in 15 minutes. I don't care what kind of conditioning you have. That is effective, efficient basketball. Zion Williamson, when he was on the court, the New Orleans Pelicans are a positive plus minus. When he's off the court, they are negative. Not many players can say that's how it works for them. Guys like LeBron James, guys like, I don't even know, some of the all-time, James Harden, right? LeBron James, like I just mentioned, those are the types of guys that when they're off the floor, the team really takes a huge hit, and Zion is already that for the New Orleans Pelicans. And I think they're at a crossroads now, not only with their coach, but with one very important person on this team, and that's Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram had a fantastic game against the Jazz. Oh, I forgot to mention, they played again today, right? So after barely losing to the Jazz, how do they respond? They get blown out by the Clippers, 126 to, I think, 126 to something, 126 to 103, right? Giving up one of the most 3 points in Clippers history, right? So they give that up. And their top player, Brandon Ingram, only gets 14 points. Zion only plays 14 minutes, gets 7 points, right? Again, 7 points in 14 minutes. That is ridiculous. Per 30 minutes, ridiculous stuff. He should be playing more minutes, guys. Derek Favors with 12, Lonzo Ball with 7. Drew Holiday, who's supposedly their best player or second best player, has 4. Melly had 8. Frank Jackson had 11. He led kind of the bench unit. Not good from the Los Angeles Clippers, and I'm ready to write them off. I mean, starting off 0-2, is it impossible? No, but now you're really relying on a team like the Grizzlies to lose more games than they should. You're relying on a team like the Blazers, who I think are now the favorite to maybe slide into that 8 slot, lose more games than they should as well. They came out with a clutch overtime victory, right? All of that, because I don't want to say that the root of their problem is that they're not playing Zion Williamson enough, but when you watch a Pelicans game, I highly encourage you, watch the next couple Pelicans games. He's just not playing enough minutes. I understand that this is delicate goods and precious moments and you don't want to risk anything, but if the concern is conditioning and he's getting 7 points in 14 minutes or 13 points in 15 minutes, I've seen enough of the conditioning. Let the kid go. Can you imagine what the Zion Williamson would look like if he was consistently playing 28 to 30, 35 minutes a game? He would be absolutely unstoppable. He'd be leading the Pelicans to the playoffs, in my opinion. So I think they're at a crossroads now, right? With Alvin Gentry. I don't think he's going to be back next season, in my opinion. I think they're going to hire somebody else. Don't be surprised if I think Jason Kidd is a perfect hire for the New Orleans Pelicans if they move off Alvin Gentry. I liked him a lot for the Knicks position. I think he's widely renowned as one of the best player development coaches in the NBA, whether he's an assistant or a head coach. And Giannis Antetokounmpo accredited a lot of his development to Jason Kidd, who was the head coach of the time in Milwaukee during Giannis's early years. Zion Williamson is a very similar player to Giannis Antetokounmpo as a a paint, more, around the rim type player. Very big, very physical, very fast, very athletic, very raw, talented wise. I think Jason Kidd would be a perfect hire. I'm not trying to shade Alvin Gentry, but there's just a lot of confusing things. If I'm a Pelicans fan, I'm really asking, why the hell isn't Zion Williamson, our best player, playing more minutes? Again, conditioning concerns. Come on, man. The other crossroads where I think the Pelicans are at is with Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram, I think, is a super, super talented player. He's fantastic, and I think he deserves the max contract that he is eligible for, right? I think he is in discussion for most improved player, and I think you can go back and forth whether him or Bam Adebayo should win it. Those two are the favorites for me. I would give a slight edge to Bam Adebayo due to team success, but statistically, I think Brandon Ingram has had a better season, right? Specifically as a scorer, plays a lot like Kevin Durant. Everyone calls him a poor man's Kevin Durant, very similar body type, very similar skill set, things like that. And if Brandon Ingram, when he enters free agency this season as a restricted free agent, he will get a max contract, right? Whether from the Pelicans or somewhere else. The Pelicans need to decide if they are going to pay Brandon Ingram or not, or if they want him back on this team, as in paying him as a restricted free agent and then moving him. Here is the problem with Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram does not fit from a basketball perspective with Zion Williamson. He just doesn't. He needs the ball in his hands constantly. He's more of an ISO player, not the greatest passer in the world. Zion Williamson needs to be surrounded by pure three-point shooters. Guys like JJ Redick make a lot of sense to surround Zion Williamson with. A team similar that the Milwaukee Bucks have, defensive, tough, three-point shooters all around him. That's perfect for Giannis. That would be perfect for Zion Williamson as well. Brandon Ingram doesn't fit that bill. And I checked this out on some advanced analytics. Brandon Ingram is a net negative when Zion Williamson is on the court. So Brandon Ingram is a negative part to the team. He is holding the team back when him and Zion Williamson are on the court together. But when Zion Williamson is off the court and it's just Brandon Ingram is one of the best analytical players in the game. He is a net positive for the New Orleans Pelicans. So again, when Brandon Ingram is playing for your best player alongside and on the court, he is holding the team back. And in my opinion, that should tell you everything you need to know. If I were the New Orleans Pelicans, I would sign him to a max contract extension and move him to a team that could use his skill set and really develop him. Teams like the New York Knicks, the Miami Heat, who could use another wing, things like that, make a lot of sense to me. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Brandon Ingram was on the way out. You would get a lot of picks, maybe some shooters for him as well. That is the route I would go, and I understand that's hard to hear for Pelicans fans because he came over in the Anthony Davis trade. But again, he just doesn't fit with Zion Williamson, and he doesn't fit the basketball fit, and I think they may need to make a decision with that. And personally, I think Alvin Gentry is on his way out. Those are my 2 cents on the Pelicans, and unfortunately, it's really starting to look like it's over before it even started for their playoff push. Again, Zion Williamson is so much fun to watch. I just wish he played more minutes. Speaking of another team that I think should break up the roster next season, the Philadelphia 76ers. Today, everyone was saying, I've said this before, the 76ers are a championship team if they can figure it the hell out. They have the talent. They could absolutely do it. They have one of the best young cores in the entire league. They just can't seem to figure it out. They're an absolute dumpster fire when it comes to team chemistry. They lost today 127-121 to the Indiana Pacers, who are without Devontae Sabonis, right? And Victor Oladipo is still working his way back from an injury. Why did they lose, you might ask? TJ Warren, who was traded from the Phoenix Suns to the Indiana Pacers in the offseason for cash considerations, dropped 53 points. 53 points. That is absolutely ridiculous. All props to TJ Warren. All props to the Indiana Pacers. They're an extremely well-coached team. But what the hell is Philadelphia doing? You have a guy in, Joel Embiid who had 41-21 tonight. 41-21, and he lost. There was also a video that surfaced during the game of him and Shaq Milton getting into a huge argument on the sidelines. The team chemistry for Philadelphia is an absolute dumpster fire. They need to break up this roster, and I think they need to fire Brett Brown. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid do not work. Similar to Brandon Ingram, I looked at some advanced analytics again, and the same situation for Brandon Ingram is the same thing when it comes to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. When Joel Embiid is on the court, Ben Simmons is a net negative offensively, and he's holding the team back offensively for the 76ers when him and Joel Embiid share the court. When Ben Simmons is alone and there is no Joel Embiid on the court, he is a phenomenal player offensively for the 76ers. He's better when Embiid's off the court. You can see it with your eyes as an eye test, and you can look at the analytics. This team needs to break up. They need to split up Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid if they want any sort of success long term. This team does not work. Al Horford does not fit this team. Tobias Harris doesn't really fit this team. The only guy that really fits this team are the shooters, Matthias Thybulle and Josh Richardson, surrounding Ben Simmons with shooters. Now, call me crazy, but if I were the Philadelphia 76ers, I would trade Joel Embiid this offseason. If I had to pick one of these two, I think Ben Simmons is a better person to build around in the future because of his age, the injury history there, and I think it's easier to build a team around Ben Simmons than it is Joel Embiid, right? And Joel Embiid, I think, would command more value in picks and potential players, shooters, I'll talk about in a minute, on the market than Ben Simmons would. Ben Simmons reminds me a lot of a young LeBron James. Is he as good as LeBron James? Absolutely not. Is he as good as young LeBron James? Absolutely not. But the play style makes a lot of sense. Also, play style of Zion, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not the greatest shooter in the world. In fact, he's a terrible shooter. Really, really good when in the paint, in transition. When Ben Simmons has a full head of steam, I don't think anybody in the league can stop him. Ben Simmons thrives in the drive and kick game. Get him shooters to surround him with. Have guys on the perimeter and let Ben Simmons be able to dominate the paint. Stop clogging up the lanes with Al Horford and Joel Embiid. It's not helping Ben Simmons. It's stunting his development. It's stunting his growth. If I were the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason, I'd fire Brett Brown, get another head coach, and I would trade I would trade Joel Embiid and get shooters around Ben Simmons. And I think the chemistry, and I think the Philadelphia 76ers would be a better team that way. I think their record would be higher. I think their offense would be smoother. I think they get more wins. I think the chemistry would be better. And Joel Embiid, it's starting to look like he might want out of Philadelphia. He doesn't look like he's enjoying the game when playing with Philly. And again, he's arguing with teammates. He's in the prime of his career. Ben Simmons is a lot younger. Joel Embiid is 27 now, or almost 27. He's in the prime. He needs to start winning some stuff. Don't be surprised if Joel Embiid wants out in the offseason. Again, I would split up this duo. I really would. I think it just makes too much sense to build around Ben Simmons. Get him shooters. Let him drive and kick. Let him dominate the paint. Stop clogging up the lanes. You're limiting Ben Simmons, who in my opinion has the highest potential on your team. I think he has more potential than Joel Embiid to be a real superstar in this league. And you're just holding him back. You're doing everything in your power to make it harder for him to be a better basketball player. I don't understand what Philadelphia is doing. Again, their chemistry is a dumpster fire. Don't be surprised if they get bounced in the first round and Joel Embiid wants out. That's all I'm saying. And if Joel Embiid wanted out, I would trade him to a team like New York, Chicago, get a ton of picks, get a ton of shooters, and just surround Ben Simmons with that. Young draft picks as well. Get that talent up there as well. That's exactly what I would do if I were Philly. Finally, the last team I want to talk about in this segment is the Utah Jazz, who did get a win against, like I mentioned, the New Orleans Pelicans. They barely won thanks to Donovan Mitchell's clutch play at the end. But today, not so much. They got blown out and stomped by the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are lower than them in the standings. And there was a viral tweet surrounding on Twitter claiming that this is going to be Donovan Mitchell's last year in Utah, and he's going to want out this offseason. I've talked about it before on this show. I'm not going to be surprised at all. There seems to be a big disconnect between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Now, if the Jazz could pick, I think they would definitely trade Gobert before they trade Mitchell, but I don't think Mitchell will give them that choice if he wants out. Kendrick Perkins commented on the tweet saying no lies detected, saying that he believes that Donovan Mitchell could want out in the near future as soon as at the end of this season. I've talked about this before, but teams that I really think should be all in on the Donovan Mitchell train, Chicago, Miami, and New York are the teams that make the most sense in my opinion. New York needs a face of the franchise, so does Chicago. Would a Zach LaVine, Donovan Mitchell straight up swap with a pick involved? Would Utah bite on that? Maybe. Would New York have enough young pieces to offer without having to give up RJ Barrett to get Donovan Mitchell to New York? Would Donovan Mitchell want to go to New York? Would he want to go to more of a contending team like the Miami Heat? And that's where I'll start. That's where I'll end. The Miami Heat and Donovan Mitchell make a lot of sense. Donovan Mitchell is very good friends with Dwayne Wade, goes to his camp, tons of social media pictures. He's also very close with Heat center Bam Adebayo. They are very good friends. You've seen it on the Bubble vlogs and things like that all over their social medias as well. They're very, very, very good friends. Now, if I had to guess where Donovan Mitchell, would want to lined up, I think the Miami Heat would be very high on his list. Donovan Mitchell, like I've said before, reminds me of a lot of a young D Wade. 2006 D Wade, 2009 D Wade, a lot of that Donovan Mitchell, his play style, his energy, his athleticism. Again, everything about him screams young Dwayne Wade. Will he live up? Will he be the legend that Dwayne Wade was? Who knows? But again, it just reminds me a lot of young Dwayne Wade. And Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra still run the Miami Heat organization, and they will see a young D Wade in him. I'm sure they've already seen it before. And again, if there's a connection there, Pat Riley will move heaven and earth to get a guy like Donovan Mitchell on the team. And the Heat have the players to make that happen. Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, draft picks. Get a combination. Now, I'm not saying trade all of those guys for Donovan Mitchell, but a trade surrounding maybe Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, and picks makes a lot of sense for Utah to surround Rudy Gobert with shooters. And again, Tyler Hero, who looks like a young ascending star in the league, one of the best shooters in the NBA. If you want to throw in Duncan Robinson in there as well, make a lot of sense for Utah. Again, they're not going to get the net value back for Donovan Mitchell because I think Donovan Mitchell's a special player in this league. But if Donovan Mitchell were to want out, I think Miami would maybe present the best offer unless the Knicks or maybe the Chicago Bulls throw in a top 3 pick plus Zach LaVine. Then you could argue Chicago might have a better offer. But who knows, maybe Mitchell will refuse to play for Chicago and will want to play for a contending team like the Nets or the Heat. Those teams make a lot of sense. Again, that viral tweet of Donovan Mitchell was surfacing. And I have to admit, I watched the Jazz game today, and there's been reports from Utah reporters and other things as well that it doesn't appear that Donovan Mitchell is having fun playing for the Utah Jazz. It's concerning. Who knows if those reports are true or not? Who knows if the tweet that was circulating today that Donovan Mitchell wants out is true or not? But Kendrick Perkins is clearly hearing some similar things. It's going to be really interesting to see the situation play out. All right, we're going to take another break. On my next segment, it's going to be my final segment on the NBA sort of reopening. I'm going to be talking about some other teams that had good starting weekends off. Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors. We'll get into those two teams and maybe some other teams as well right after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I'm Alex Masfer. I just finished talking about some of the teams that did not have the greatest opening weekend to the return of the NBA, and also some roster changes I think could happen and should happen to those teams. Again, the Pelicans, 76ers, and Utah Jazz. I want to transition now to at least two teams that had a really good start to their opening weekend back here in the NBA. And I'll start off with the Miami Heat because I just finished talking about them during that Donovan Mitchell sort of bit. They had a really good game against the Denver Nuggets, better than I anticipated. Now, I mentioned that they are my dark horse team in the East besides the Boston Celtics. Again, I think that they're going to beat the Bucks in the second round, again, because of all their length and athleticism and everything like that. They absolutely whooped the Denver Nuggets today in a blowout win. They won 125-25. Again, the Heat performed way better than I thought I did. Some of the highlights, right? Jimmy Butler had 22, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Bam Adebayo had 22, 9 and 6. Duncan Robinson had 17 points. And the thing is with the Heat is they also have guys that step up. Kelly Olynyk had 20, Dragic had 13, Kendrick Nunn had 11, Jay Crowder had 9, Hero had 7, right? One of the reasons why I'm so high on the Miami Heat and why I really do believe they can beat the Bucks in the second round is because while they do have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo who consistently perform every night, and I'm going to throw Duncan Robinson in there too, who also consistently performs every night from the three-point range, getting at least 14 points a game, there's always a group of 2 or 3 guys that also step up and have big nights, whether it's Crowder, Olynyk, Nunn, Hero, Iguodala, sometimes Derek Jones Jr., right? Even Miles Leonard sometimes. There's just a lot of firepower on the Miami Heat, and not to mention they play phenomenal defense. They're super long and athletic. The only weakness I really see on this Heat team is similar to the Lakers. I don't trust their guards defensively. Not if you consider Jimmy Butler a guard, I obviously trust him, but it's like more like Dragic, Hero, and Nunn, who I don't trust as much. And also guys like Olynyk as well get taken advantage of rather easily. But again, the Heat have an electric three-point shooters, and when guys like, you already know Duncan Robinson's going to shoot the lights out of the building, guys like Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn as well, but when, Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala and Kelly Olynyk, are knocking down threes, again, Kelly Olynyk today was 4 of 6, Jay Crowder was 3 of 4, Iguodala was 1 for 2, right? Then the Heat become really, really hard to stop, and a matchup against The Bucks, I think, is the Bucks' worst nightmare, right? Because when you think about it, the Heat have the perimeter shooting to really keep up with the Bucks' offense and keep them in the game. On top of that, I think the Heat have maybe the only player outside of Kawhi Leonard who can really give Giannis Antetokounmpo a challenge on the defensive end, and that's Bam Adebayo. He held them to under 20 points in their matchup. The Heat are undefeated against the Bucks, the only team to be undefeated against them this season. I really do believe a second-round matchup between the Bucks and Heat is the Bucks' worst nightmare, man. And again, we're not talking enough about Duncan Robinson. When Duncan Robinson, I went on this advanced analytics, when Duncan Robinson is on the floor for the Miami Heat play like a 63-win team. When Duncan Robinson is off the floor for the Miami Heat, they play more like a 40 to 45-win team. Not a lot of players have a big difference in that. Guys like LeBron, guys like Zion have that difference. Duncan Robinson was an undrafted player who went to the G League, who then became, this, absolute sharpshooter for the Miami Heat. And I don't really think it's close when it comes to player development and finding hidden gems. I think the Heat and Raptors are 1 and 2. I would give the slight edge to the Heat. Their player development is absolutely ridiculous. And again, they absolutely destroyed the Denver Nuggets today. I expected the Nuggets to win that game. They're very high in the West. They had phenomenal scrimmage games. Bobo played a little bit. He didn't do so hot. Michael Porter Jr. had a terrible game. Jokic got his, obviously. But the Heat just looked really good tonight, man. And with all those weapons on offense, all that firepower, if Jimmy Butler, who looks rested, who looks healthy, I think he had a wrist injury earlier in the year that he was playing through. He looks healthy again. If you're limiting your guys, Jimmy Butler only 30 minutes tonight, Bam Adebayo only 28, right? Again, you already know Butler and Adebayo are going to come with the firepower. They're going to get 20 plus most likely. But when Kendrick Nunn, Jay Crowder, Olynyk got 20, again, Dragic with 13, these other guys kill you as well, then it's more than just those two guys. There's a lot of players on this team. This team is this Miami Heat team is really, really deep. I absolutely love their team. I love their shooters. I love Duncan Robinson, one of the coolest stories in the NBA, in my opinion. And Jimmy Butler might have been right, man, when he said that this team could win a championship. I wouldn't go that far, but I think he was right, man. I remember he got a lot of heat for, no pun intended, he got a lot of heat for leaving Philadelphia, and everyone said he went to a worse situation. The Heat are on a roll. They look really good. They're trying to get into the top 3 in the East. I think they might pull it off, especially if the Celtics slip on a couple of games. They lost to the Bucks recently. It's going to be so much fun to watch the Heat story play out, the Duncan Robinson story, the Bam Adebayo story, everything right there. The Heat are looking to return back to relevance as well. I want to transition now to the Toronto Raptors, who I think are not getting enough love, and I am at fault for this as well. When Kawhi Leonard left, I saw a team of just a bunch of dudes who played really hard defense, and that's about it. They were still a piece away. They needed a guy like a Kawhi Leonard to be a true championship contender. Man, I might have been wrong on that. They absolutely gave it to the Lakers tonight defensively. I think Toronto is the best defensive team in the league, and I can say that pretty confidently. Their defensive positioning, in my opinion, is second to nobody. And I love the Lakers defense. I love the Heat defense. I love some of these other teams. The Clippers as well play phenomenal defense. The Celtics, the Bucks. But man, the Toronto Raptors, with not a lot of talent as some of these other teams, just lock people up. Locked LeBron James up tonight. Again, LeBron James and Anthony Davis combined for under 35 points. That was the worst game of the year for them combined. And it's in an important game, a playoff-type atmosphere. Again, Kyle Lowry went off. Kyle Lowry getting 14 rebounds. Absolutely incredible. The Raptors, I think, are maybe the hardest working team in the NBA. I think they're maybe the best coached team in the NBA. I think Greg Popovich is the best head coach in the league. But Nick Nurse is top 3 in my opinion, man. The way he gets his guys in defensive positioning is absolutely ridiculous. His defensive system, their player development is absolutely off the charts. I mean, again, everything with the Toronto Raptors is incredible. I think we're not giving them enough credit, in my opinion. I wouldn't surprise me at all, man, if they went on another mini run. I just don't see them as a championship team because they're missing that alpha scorer, in my opinion, that Kawhi Leonard. They're just missing that. But man, everyone's sleeping on them, man. Just because there isn't that big name, right? Pascal Siakam is their guy. Kyle Lowry, OG Anunoby had a great game, earlier today as well. But I don't trust that they don't have that go-to guy in the fourth quarter, man. But tonight it was Kyle Lowry, and if they consistently find a guy every game, then who knows? Maybe they really can compete. The ceiling I see with the Toronto Raptors is still Eastern Conference Finals. I thought they were going to be a second-round elimination, but if they play defense like that, they can hang with anybody, in my opinion. If they keep the game close, I think they have some guys, specifically Kyle Lowry, if he's coming up in the clutch. I really do believe that they could really make a push and really, really do well. And again, everybody's sleeping on them, man. I did not give them enough credit. I did not think they were going to be this good post Kawhi Leonard. They are so defensively sound and such good defensive position. They absolutely locked up the Lakers tonight. I can't wait to continue to watch their games to see if they can continue to take that next step. Maybe if Pascal Siakam took another leap, a little bit of a mini leap of taking over fourth quarters. That's what I need to see from a Toronto Raptors player. Tonight it was Kyle Lowry. I don't trust him to consistently do that. I need Pascal Siakam to take that leap, but it would be absolutely incredible to watch. All right, we're going to take one final break. On the other side of this last break, I'm going to be talking about Trevor Lawrence. What are some teams that could potentially land arguably the greatest or one of the greatest quarterback prospects of all time, in my opinion? We'll get into that quickly after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Alex Mesfer. Thank you so much again for continuing to listening to the show. I'm going to switch gears here to the NFL for a little bit. It got me thinking, there's a lot of speculation about the college football season and everything like that, and a lot of rosters are being depleted because a lot of guys are opting out. And I was thinking, who is going to win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes? And I want to go through a couple teams that could really use Trevor Lawrence's services, and I would love to see Trevor Lawrence on potentially. Again, Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best quarterback prospect of all time. I think he's the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck in particular. He's got everything. He's got size, athleticism, arm strength, arm talent, leadership ability, winning record in college. Obviously, he's only lost like 1 or 2 games. Again, his stats are absolutely off the charts. Just for quick reference, last year had 36 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Ridiculous stuff. The year before that, he had 30 touchdowns and 4 interceptions as a true freshman. Clemson's going to win the national championship game this year. If there is a college football season, I can almost guarantee you that. I love Ohio State. I love some of these other teams. I love Alabama. But Clemson's going to win the national championship game this year. Again, I think Trevor Lawrence is a generational quarterback prospect. The only pro comparison I can come up for him is honestly John Elway. And I know that sounds crazy, but he plays the exact same way. Again, I think he's a generational quarterback prospect. So some teams that potentially get him. Let's get through the obvious one, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, this is the favorite to land him, get the first overall pick in the draft. I believe that's going to be the case. The Jaguars, I think, are the worst team in the league. They're still probably going to end up trading Yannick Ngakoue, who's holding out currently, and maybe even Leonard Fournette. I like Gardner Minshew, the story. I think he's actually a pretty good player. Reminds me a lot of Ryan Fitzpatrick, in my opinion. I just don't think he's talented enough to completely elevate the worst team in football. Again, I think Trevor Lawrence will be a Jacksonville Jaguar. Trevor Lawrence has that ability to come in right away and turn a franchise around. Only a few guys have that in NFL history. Again, Andrew Luck turned the Colts from the worst team in the league to a division winner and a playoff team. Trevor Lawrence has that ability. Would he be able to do that with Jacksonville? Who knows? But I put him a tier above Burrow, Tagovailoa, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, all his prospects. Again, I think he's the best prospect since Andrew Luck. Now let's get into everybody's worst nightmare, and that's if the New England Patriots get Trevor Lawrence. Now, I didn't think this was going to happen initially, specifically after the Cam Newton signing, but now, after some of these guys like Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, and Marcus Cannon have opted out, not to mention the Patriots have the hardest schedule in the league, I'm starting to think that more and more that the Patriots might be a worse team than we believe. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they only won 5 or 6 games this year. I think they'll win more closer to 7, 8 max. But again, wouldn't surprise me at all if they won only 4 or 5 and they're right up there in the top pick conversation. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, if Bill Belichick gets his hands on Trevor Lawrence, you can just run the dynasty back, man, because again, Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent with that coaching, that football IQ being taught to him by Bill Belichick. Not to mention they're going to put a great defense around him. Oh my God, man, you might as well just run the dynasty back. The Patriots will be the best team in the NFL again, right up there with the Kansas City Chiefs within the next 3 years after drafting Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. That would be absolutely crazy and ludicrous stuff. Now, I want to switch to some 2 teams that I think could also have poor years that could go after him, even though I think they're not as likely. 2 teams that are in desperate need of a quarterback, in my opinion. The Chicago Bears, I think, are going to win too many games, but I don't think Nick Foles is the long-term answer there. I really do believe that Nick Foles will have a somewhat decent season there in Chicago. There's a lot of familiarity with the offensive system. I think they'll be about a 500 football team with a good defense, so I don't think they'll be in the running, but I understand that Chicago is definitely a QB of the future needy team. Also on that list is, there's teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers that could use a future successor to Big Ben. They're not going to be bad enough. But the only other teams that I could really see potentially, I see the Carolina Panthers. Maybe if their offense isn't as good as some people believe, including myself, I think they'll have a really good offense. I think they're just in an absolutely brutal division, so who knows how many games they will win. If Teddy Bridgewater doesn't have the greatest year, no one's going to, pick Teddy Bridgewater over Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence will be the number 1 overall pick. That could be interesting. I want to give you a dark horse team, though, and the final team I'm going to talk about in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes and who could be the worst team in the NFL. Why aren't we talking about the New York Jets potentially being the worst team in the league? They're going to finish last in the division. I think they have the worst or second worst coach in the league in Adam Gase, and guys are leaving left, right, and center. They traded Jamal Adams. C.J. Mosley opted out today. Their best defensive player now that Jamal Adams is gone, he has opted out. Le'Veon Bell could get traded. He doesn't seem happy as well. I don't think Sam Darnold could overcome this, and I like Sam Darnold a lot. The question becomes, if Sam Darnold and the New York Jets have the number 1 overall pick, are the Jets going to give up on Darnold and go with Trevor Lawrence? I like Sam Darnold a lot. I think he's a franchise quarterback for somebody, and maybe even the New York Jets. But if you get the number 1 overall pick, there's very few quarterbacks in the NFL where I wouldn't move off of them and get Trevor Lawrence. Sam Darnold is not one of those people. I think you could trade Sam Darnold for a high pick and go with Trevor Lawrence and kind of really redo the reboot after getting rid of Adam Gase. I think it's actually a possibility. I know it's a dark horse thing, but again, the Jets are just not a good football team, and they keep losing people, and a lot of people don't want to play for Adam Gase, and Sam Darnold wasn't talented enough to overcome it last year. The team only got worse. He's definitely not talented enough to overcome it this season. That's going to be interesting to see, but don't be surprised at all if the New York Jets are the worst team in football, and they give up on Sam Darnold and they get Trevor Lawrence. If that were the case, I could see Sam Darnold going to a team like the Los Angeles Rams, Pittsburgh Steelers, some of these other QB-needy teams I mentioned, and he would be a really good franchise quarterback if he could get into a better system. Similar to what happened to Brett Favre from the Falcons to the Packers, I could see that happening to Sam Darnold. Maybe a little bit of a crazy theory. Let me know what you guys think if the Jets could potentially get Trevor Lawrence. Also, let me know what you think of Trevor Lawrence. Do you think I'm crazy that he is one of the best quarterback prospects of all time? I think he's easily top 5, maybe, quarterback prospects of all time. He's going to be absolutely incredible. I think he's no way, chance in hell, he's a bust. It's going to be so much fun to watch. That is going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so happy the NBA is back. It was so much fun to watch games today and yesterday, and then finally get to talk about some real live action sports. The NBA is back. So much fun again. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media, leave us a 5-star review, and subscribe to the podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.